12:20 a.m. Boy, the radio waves just aren't as long as they are on some other radio stations. That is correct. So why don't you tune in when you get home to www.jetbroadcasting.live. Better yet, you can always watch the show on archive on our Facebook page. What's that? Why don't you like us on Facebook? 1420 WEMB Sports Radio. Now, today's program, I talk about the best guests and the hardest-hitting opinions. Old friend Teresa Gennaro comes on, talking a little bit about horse racing at 12:45. I really enjoy talking to Teresa. For one thing, she writes for a website called BrooklynBackstretch.com, very articulate. Also is a high school English teacher when she's not covering horse racing. But I suggest you look at BrooklynBackstretch.com, not only to read what she has to say, but there's an enthusiasm and really a love of the sport that Teresa has and of horses. And, Belmont's coming up, and that's her hometown race, obviously. But more than that, the tragedies continue at Santa Anita. And also, we really haven't talked that much about the Preakness Stakes. It was the fastest Preakness Stakes in 12 years without the Kentucky Derby winner in it. Think about that. So I want to get up to date on that. I think the big news last night, the St. Louis Blues go to the Stanley Cup Finals, first time in 49 years. Blues aren't necessarily one of those teams that you think of as being cursed, even though they've never won a Stanley Cup. Maybe it's because back in the old days when the NHL went from 6 teams to 12 in 1967, the Blues made the Stanley Cup Finals the first 3 years of their existence. Now, I don't think they won a game, but that's how Scotty Bowman got to be known as a great coach and such. He basically outcoached the 6 expansion teams. They were guaranteed one of them to play in the Stanley Cup Finals. You thought it was just the Golden Knights there. Well, the format was a little bit different in those days, obviously, but no, nevertheless, the Blues go to the Stanley Cup Finals. First time in 49 years, and they play the team, Boston Bruins, who they played back in 1970. Bobby Orr's flying goal, that one. Yeah, and I know that, there's a lot of people out there, they say, Marky, you just can't talk hockey in the Tri-Cities. Don't even try it. I say, nonsense. Look at all the people wearing Predators gear around town, and also I want to do something new. I want to do something innovative. I note that I think that hockey is coming along, and I think it's got a tremendous chance of growth. I think it has grown. I think the growth has been slow and steady. It's like the tortoise winning the race. It is certainly the most exotic sport out there. I don't think you're going to deny me on that. And there's something, it's not political, at least not yet, which is something that the big 3 sports of football, baseball, and certainly basketball cannot say. And as a result, I think that it's polarizing fans. You don't have that in hockey. Just saying. Now, with that, I want to go in my opening monologue. This is the second time that I've done it in the history of the show, 3 times. It's going to be a movie review. I reviewed Solo. Remember that? I wore my leather jacket. It was the closest thing I had to a Han Solo vest, and all that. I didn't have my DL-44. That was the only thing. I didn't have Han Solo's blaster. I just, all this. But, yeah. My idol, Han Solo. Kind of, it goes with that, think of Han Solo. He was kind of the outsider. He was the outsider, not kind of. He was the outsider who came into the Rebel Alliance, that sort of thing. And so I guess I've always identified with that. When you move around as much as I have in my life, I think I've lived 16 different places. You're bound to be the outsider. And one thing is that you're able to view different areas against each other, if you will, or compare them to each other, this sort of thing. I've said many times, the fans in East Tennessee, they have been receiving media that oftentimes is little more than extension of the public relations department, and as such, there's very little criticism to the sports scene around you. As such, I think it limits growth. I really do. But the other thing that I would say is that it has allowed me to take a look at the area in terms of other areas. And I'll just say this. I believe that East Tennessee, and I don't think that it's any secret here, a little bit behind the times. Look, slow way of life, laid back, all that. This isn't Greenwich Village. Some would say that's why we love it. But no, it is going to be behind the times. Okay? And so, that's what makes this so perfect. St. Louis Blues on the ice, going to the Stanley Cup Finals, an area sports talk show host, yours truly, commenting on a sports movie that came out 2 years ago is probably par for the course. And I'm speaking of I, Tonya, which I finally got to see this weekend. And I finally realized why I always liked Tonya Harding, now Tonya Price. She's a figure that appeals to everyone who's been an outsider, who had a rough edge, who received a bad break. In many ways, she represents the reasons why people are afraid to try. Look, dream pursuit isn't easy. My dream was to be a sports talk show host. It took me, I was here at 26. We had a different ownership of the station. They cut my throat over something I didn't do. It took me 20 years to come back. That's a dream. That's pursuing it. And so despite the belief that if we just try hard enough, we'll make it, and there is something to be said to that, there's often outside factors or choices we make due to our own naivete that not only have us failing to achieve our goal, but really getting burned along the way. And that's Tonya Harding. And Tonya does a pretty good job of revealing this. And in doing so, it makes her out to be, something of a sympathetic figure, but also one of greatness. Now let's take a look at the outsider. We've all been it one time or the other. There's been some group we didn't fit in with. It's something anyone following the story as it happened can see. When it came out that Nancy Kerrigan had been the victim of an attack designed to prevent her from going to the Olympics and Tonya might be a suspect, Kerrigan's mother Brenda told reporters it might be nicer if Harding would not compete in the Olympics. Remember that? Said it from the window of her car. Made the statement Brenda Kerrigan did before all the facts were in. It was a judgmental comment. Speaking of, Tonya doesn't belong. She's not a member of our club. And so, Tonya Harding became the subject of national ridicule. It's easy to pick on the outsider. They're different. Yeah, she was different, Tonya Harding was. As the movie portrays, she did not come from a background of privilege. I was listening to an interview here, and he said, Tonya Harding has said she was trailer trash, and her mother says, that's not true, we had a nice trailer. Her roots were working class, trying to compete in a sport with a culture of white-collar privilege. Her mother is portrayed to be demanding to the point of cruelty. Now, by the way, I do understand the tough coach aspect of sport. It's really a famous story. George Brett, after he hit 390 one season, came home to his dad after the whole year. He had come closer to hitting 400 than any player had in 40 years. And his dad looks at him after he posts, like I said, the highest batting average in 39 years in Major League Baseball. And he looks at him and he says, you couldn't get 2 more hits. And by the way, he doesn't say 2 more hits. He says 2 more blanking hits. And that was a motivation that worked for George Brett. May have worked to a certain extent for Tonya Harding, but it was really cruel and it had its side effects. Case in point, sports writing friend of mine, actually I've had him on the show, once told me back in the 90s 2 most attractive women he ever saw were Alyssa Silverstone and Tonya Harding. After all, Harding was petite and button cute, long strawberry blonde hair, really adorable smile. But in I, Tonya, she is repeatedly called unattractive by her mother. And as a result, she marries the first boy who tells her she's pretty, and we all know how that turned out. But it wasn't the only way she was different. She was different in that she was the first American skater to perform the triple axel. Roger Bannister, meet Tonya Harding. She was different in that she won the 91 U.S. Championships with her triple axel, making her the best skater in the country, if not the world. Just a year too soon. She was different in that she apologetically changed figure skating, not only with her ability, but her style. The scene in which Margot Robbie comes and performs to ZZ Top's Sleeping Bag, now you understand why I had the show lead off with that, makes us wonder when we see I, Tonya, what is this? Is she actually performing Sleeping Bag? And then you say you love it. And in doing so, Tonya Harding transforms skating. The sport is no longer restricted by the boundaries of daintiness. No, it's now sultry. It's no longer, okay, we're just going to wait around, see her jump and spin. No, that's not it. Instead, your attention, because it's Sleeping Bag, is focused on Tonya Harding's every single move. A forgettable glide on the ice? No. That becomes dancing. A modest jump is exceptional. How's she going backwards? Triple axel? Historic. Look, winning a gold medal isn't innovative. Tonya changing a sport the way only an outsider can, that's innovative. She was different in that she did overcome her background until it sucked her back in. As Tonya illustrates, a gold medalist like Katarina Witt earns a lucrative endorsement deal from Diet Coke. Finish fourth place in the Olympics, you go wait tables. Still, would Nancy Kerrigan, the silver medalist, would she have, been in that Disney parade, a de facto Snow White, and said how corny it was? Or would she have hosted Saturday Night Live? Or even last year be Inside Edition's reporter from the Super Bowl, for crying out loud, if it wasn't for Tonya Harding? Now, as the movie I, Tonya ends, Harding performs through the closing credits. And as glamorous as an actress as Robbie is, her appearance is undeniably overtaken by Tonya Harding's. Now, to listen to Tonya Harding speak, she presents herself as something of a Buck Weaver type figure. You know who Buck Weaver is? He was a third baseman of the Chicago Black Sox that threw the 1919 World Series. Pretty much established his crime was saying he'd go along with Chick Gandil's plan, but then deciding it wasn't worth it. Weaver played his best in a World Series at .324, didn't make an error in the field, didn't receive a dime from the gamblers. His lifetime banishment from baseball was a result of not reporting a scandal he knew about, which is roughly what Harding's crime against figure skating is. But if Weaver was reinstated posthumously to baseball, think about this. It would start up, well, why isn't Joe Jackson in? Why isn't Pete Rose in? You'd ultimately have to reinstate them. And then as sports gambling becomes more and more and more commonplace, there's the potential for corruptness and, making the outcomes on the field fixed. So that's why you don't reinstate Buck Weaver posthumously. Rightly or wrongly. And probably, it's a matter of circumstance. But I'm just going to ask you this. I said, after seeing I, Tonya, I started to wonder, what if U.S. figure skating reinstated Tonya Harding? And she's got a lifetime ban. Look, the woman has been punished. She's been in through everything from Penthouse selling her wedding night video to celebrity boxing. So what would happen if Harding was, or it's now Tonya Price, would be reinstated? She could become a skating instructor, let's just say. And perhaps help future figure skaters from, less than privileged backgrounds, as she was, participate in a sport. The sport would become more inclusive. As it stands now, U.S. figure skating would bar a skater who trained under Harding. That's what the ban does. Maybe it's time to let Tonya be innovative again. Something else. This has always bothered me. The way Nancy Kerrigan has handled this. I realize that Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan are not going to become friends. I understand that. But she really has become
that in 2017, Tennessee had 1,200